All right, folks who are just trickling in, just go ahead and drop in where you're from in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. I am Tramel Howard, and I'm the Policy and External Relations Manager for the Education Trust in Louisiana. We thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we have a phenomenal group of folks who will take us through a journey for promising practices of partnerships as we take a deep dive into teacher diversity. We know that access to a racially and culturally diverse teacher workforce is beneficial for all students, particularly for students of color, who often thrive in classrooms led by teachers who share their racial and cultural background. Unfortunately, the diversity of the national public school teacher workforce does not reflect the diversity of the student population. The Education Trust recently released a 50-state scan tool that shows promising practices across the country and provides data analysis as well as a landscape of policies and practices. We're excited today to partner with the New Teacher Project, who also recently released a report entitled The Broken Pipeline that also takes a look at promising practices in teacher diversity. Please be sure to utilize the chat throughout today's presentation, as we want this to be as interactive as possible. The next voices you will hear will be that of my esteemed colleague, Eric Duncan, who is the brains behind this amazing operation, as well as Tequila Browning, who is a champion for teacher diversity for the New Teacher Project. Without any further ado, I'll allow Eric and Tequila to take it away.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think we're waiting for Eric to be able to hop in. But hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. At TNTP, as Tramel said, we recently released a report called The Broken Pipeline, where we really focused on looking at some of the things that were contributing to what we're seeing as far as a lack of teacher diversity. And I want to be clear that when we talk about teacher diversity, it's not just a nice to have, right? There are real outcomes that impact students' lives that matter because of the race of their teacher. And so research has shown that students with teachers of the same race are less likely to be suspended, more likely to get into gifted programs, and more likely, frankly, to complete high school and go on to college. And there are lots of factors that contribute to that problem, but one of those factors that often goes overlooked, and one of the ones that we focused on, was simply a lack of diversity in traditional teacher prep programs. And so this slide here, the data you see actually shows the percentage of the candidates in teacher prep programs, but the breakdown is by race. You see overwhelmingly whites in traditional and in alt-cert. The numbers are a little bit smaller in non-higher ed alternative certification methods, but still there's a lot of room to improve there. And we do know that the large proportion of our teacher force comes from traditional higher ed programs. The next slide just kind of tells you about the report, and one of the things that we calculated within the report was what we are calling a teacher prep diversity gap. So it basically compares the demographics of the teacher prep program enrollees and candidates to the percentage of public school students and their demographics within each state. And it helped us, you can go to the next slide, helped us sort of understand and break down the fact that we found that in 48 states, there is a teacher prep diversity gap, and most of those are actually large gaps. As a matter of fact, 43 states have a gap of at least 10 percentage points. So sort of on the heat map that you see to your right, the darker the color, the wider the gap that we found. And a significant programs, as we said, of future teachers. So not only do we have a problem with the current teacher force, there's a problem with our the pipeline of the teacher force as well, we all found that they're more than 90% white. Close to over 450 of those programs, and that accounts for about 11% of total teacher prep enrollment. So as you see, unless we sort of fix this bleed, we're never going to get out of the problem of the lack of teacher diversity within our schools as matched to student demographics. And so what do we do about it? You don't want to just navel gaze at the problem. One of the things that we have identified is some key strategies and steps that leaders at every level could take on to really start to get at closing the gap. So prep programs, one of the things we've said is just simply prioritizing goals and being very accountable towards closing the educator prep gap that we're seeing. And so developing some strategies and admissions requirements that increase diversity, and considering some financial incentives as well. But it doesn't stop there, right? I mean, we've got to think about what educator prep programs can do, but then it's also imperative that districts are partnering with prep programs to consider ways that they can also be better consumers and really push for, from a demand perspective, a higher quality and higher diversity of candidates coming out of those programs. Another thing is I would be remiss if I didn't highlight here is to think about retention. Teachers, once they get into districts and get into schools, if we don't do the job right, then they'll continue to sort of trickle in and then trickle back out. And again, we'll never stop the bleed and never begin to close the educator diversity gap that we're seeing. And there is a role for states to play as well. We think that states can do a good job by way of allowing for more alternative CERT programs where we are seeing a little bit better numbers as far as diversity. They can require educator prep programs to actually set and be more transparent and report on diversity goals. And so the final one is to think about certification requirements that don't have a clear connection to classroom effectiveness. This is one, there's a lot of discussion and controversy about this one, but we really push for the fact that we know that some of our exams, like the Praxis, disproportionately screen out candidates of color, and they don't correlate consistently to effectiveness. And so when you think about it from a policy analysis perspective, any policy, as we know, that disproportionately affects a certain population, especially that it's not yielding the results that we want, should be examined. Now, if it correlated strongly with effectiveness, then I think at TNTP we would be all for considering ways to just help more diverse candidates pass those exams, but they don't correlate to effectiveness, but they're at the same time overwhelmingly screening out candidates of color. And I'll pass it over to Eric at this point.
Thank you so much, Tequila. That was really informative. Let me quickly point to something before we get into this really robust discussion with some of our practitioners in Louisiana. I want to point to a tool that we just came out with at Ed Trust that I think can be really helpful as you all from across the country are thinking about ways to ensure that your state is advancing their policies and practices to increase the racial diversity of the workforce, a tool that you can use to make sure that that's happening. So I'll point to this really quickly, and it supplements a lot of what Tequila was saying about different strategies and tactics that states can really lead on, and prep programs and districts to advance this work. So I'm gonna, I put a link in the chat for this site, so feel free to click on it and play with it as I sort of give a brief overview of the functions of the site and how it really supplements nicely the introduction that Tequila gave about the lack of diversity at the prep level and ways, thank you for sharing that link as well, Tequila, and ways that that states can really address these. So we looked at all 50 states in the country and rated them on 5 sort of core areas. The first 2 sort of set the foundation for how states should be addressing the lack of diversity in the workforce, and that's ensuring that there's visible and actionable data, And I'd also, by the way, recommend that you zoom in on the screen if it's a little harder to see. But visible and actionable data is the first sort of tab that we rate on. And then setting clear goals. So Tequila brought this up as one of the really important ways that states should take the lead in ensuring that districts, prep programs, and systems within this educational framework are setting concrete goals to increase the diversity of the workforce. And then there are strategies that involve sort of the three areas of the pipeline: preparation program investments, intentional recruitment of candidates of color, and then, to Tequila's point, retention. What are some of the strategies that are important at the state level to retain educators of color? And so we're going to focus on Louisiana today. So just to set the stage for our incredible practitioners, I'll click on Louisiana. One of the things, again, that Tequila brought up was setting clear goals. So what does the state do to sort of lead this process? And so we rated, and you'll be able to look at this as well, we rated states on a number of strategies that would entice or require districts and prep programs to set goals. One is sort of a clear numeric goal at the state level, ensuring that there's opportunities for stakeholder engagement on these goals, working to provide guidance funding for districts and prep programs, to Tequila's point, to set those goals and invest in strategies. And then all of that sort of frame within a task force or advisory group within the state education agency to do so. So there are areas that the state really has done well with in terms of participating in certain programming to set certain goals and have some accountability there. But there's a little ways to go, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we bring up our practitioners and some of the work that they're doing at the state and local level. So you can go through each state. There's comprehensive data, demographic data. Some states, where available, have not only really comprehensive state data that looks at the way that that students based on racial subgroups are experiencing same-race teachers, or in schools that have a percentage of same-race teachers, but also district data. So really comprehensive data set and policy scan. And then I'll show you one more page that we think is really helpful for examples, right? So we all are looking for, what are other states doing? What are states doing to address some of these diversity concerns? So for each of our core sort of 5 areas, we look at 4 to 5 strategies. And on this page, you're able to look at what are other states doing really well to address some of these policy priorities. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but we have a link to this site for you to look at and to sort of play with. I'm always around if you have questions or concerns, but I really want to get to our panel to talk a little bit about what Louisiana is doing from a partnership perspective, ensuring that all these systems are interacting in a way that advance educator diversity at the state and local level. So I'm going to turn it over to a number of my colleagues for a brief discussion. Thank you, Tequila and Tramel, for your insights and support. All right. My colleague Andrew will moderate the panel. And I'm going to bring on the other folks to join him real quick. So we'll welcome them. And again, if you have questions, comments in the chat, please make sure that you are utilizing that to the fullest extent. I'm going to hop off and turn it over to you, Andrew.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. So yeah, my name is Andrew Vaughan. I'm with TNTP, and it's my honor to facilitate a panel discussion focused on really this idea of partnerships between teacher preparation programs, districts, and states. And so I'd like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and the organization that they represent. Maybe Renee, if you could start.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here today to be on this panel. My name is Renee Akbar, and I'm an associate professor at Xavier University of Louisiana, located in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Thanks, Renee. Tanya?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tanya Rose. I am an assistant professor at Southern University A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, currently in the School of Education.
Thanks, Tanya. Kim?
Hi, everybody. So excited to be a part of this conversation today. My day job is I'm the Executive Director of Educator Development at Louisiana Department of Education. But by night, I actually still teach high school virtually, and I'm very active working within my school district as well.
Thanks, everyone. And so we have basically a question for each of the panelists, and then I'll ask a question for all panelists, and then there'll be a few minutes at the end for participants to ask questions too. But my first question, Kim, is to you. Can you tell us or talk to us about the state's, the LDOE's priorities on educator diversity, and how you hope to work with teacher preparation programs and districts across the state to support the work of these priorities?
Sure, and I'm so glad that Tequila opened with that report. If you listen, because it's actually been pretty instrumental in a lot of the work that I've been able to do even before I joined the department. And I was also really glad to get another look at where the data is, because for every step, we have a million more steps that we need to take in a lot of different directions. And so I think one of the most powerful things is that we recognize that, and there's a lot of plate spinning, because we know that in order to really increase diversity, there's no one thing you could possibly do that would erase the hundreds of years of why we do not have an appropriately diverse teaching force. So one of the very first things, and it's work that I've been able to sort of carry in, and it's work that that we've now really embraced, it was taking a look at how do we actually create a pipeline sooner, right? Because before teacher prep or higher ed can do anything, they've got to have a pipeline that feels like school and like teaching is a place that they would even bother to return to upon exit. So we've really taken a look in a lot of partnerships, particularly with Educators Rising, and looking at our pre-educator pathway and eliminating some of the barriers that started well before a child even gets to college. We took a look at where courses were traditionally offered, and it was typically spaces where there had to be like advanced enrollment or honors courses. And that was pretty devastating, because that was basically taking away a complete level of access for students, particularly students of color, because we know that students of color they historically currently do not have access to certain types of courses in the same proportion to their white peers. So we took a look at how could we actually create a pathway that serves a purpose for making it like sort of jumpstart, like the technical option for students who may not take a direct route to college. And making sure that we emphasize that we need those students as well, like anybody who's going to bring rich things and diversity into the teaching profession. How do we extend it to them? And then we've also been doing a lot of training around the need for this, and I'm going to get to more about that in just a second. But every time a university develops a chapter of this space, or every time a new school district comes aboard and says, yes, we would like to implement this pathway, we make sure that they understand, do you have a plan in place for how you're actually going to talk to students of color? Because wishing is not a plan, right? So actually supporting them and training them, and how do you actually have conversations? Where are you placing these programs? If you place programs for early recruitment in a place that has very few students of color, then we're not going to make any dent on our pipeline. So these are things that are actively going on now. We've actually just awarded some sort of startup funding around this. And again, prioritizing schools that actually had a plan. What are you going to do whenever you receive this money to make sure that the class that you develop serves our ultimate purpose of creating a diverse and culturally responsive workforce? And that was critical. Of same piece, reporting on diversity, that's such, it seems to be an easy lift, but it's one that we're still working on. So right now our school report cards, they have to report on whether or not, on the fact of do you have a diverse staff? Like, what's that ratio look like? And that's public facing information. And then in terms of higher ed or teacher prep, our quality rating system, one of the very first domains is talking about your plan for recruiting. So we really hope that kind of by supporting school districts and high schools that we're creating those conversations and that pipeline so that teacher prep can be more successful in that space. And then to all of that, and this goes back to what Tukwila was saying in that report, we have to change the way we train human beings, because to be able to introduce the idea of diversity, it's an idea that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So in our programming, our fellowships, the training that we're now looking to give teachers around their materials that they use, our fellowships for principals, how are you planning to actually do this if not first starting in a space where you understand what it means and why it's so critical to have a culturally responsive teaching and leading force to begin with? So we're kind of done like making these trainings separate. They're one thing. It all supports each other. And so making sure that we are putting all of these things in priority, making schools a place that students of color would want to return to be able to be a teacher. Those pieces are important too. And so we do see that filtering down even to the way we're preparing leaders and teachers on things that traditionally may not have ever been looked at in terms of an equity lens. And I think that all of these things are really, really critical pieces that all work in tandem. The only other thing that I was going to add is that for districts to really get behind this, like this is everybody's problem. It doesn't matter like where you are located in the state or the country. We just started a fellowship for human resource offices so that they could actually figure out how do you do this? Again, trying to help them make more concrete plans, because we can report on it and we could encourage it and we can demand it, right? We can make sure that it's in policy. But if people don't know how and they're still not using the language and they still don't understand the why behind how critical these needs are, we can't hope to have optimum success. So we're looking at it from several different places, lots of different levers, and again, like spinning all these different plates, because we realize that there's no one solution that's going to help. But that doesn't mean we wait until the perfect one lands in our laps.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks so much. And I see that Sito joined. Sito, could you just take a second to introduce yourself? That'd be great.
Everybody has having a little bit of technology difficulties. Cito Narcisse, Superintendent of East Baton Rouge Parish Public Schools.
Thanks so much. So, Dr. Rose, Tanya, I have a question for you. As a teacher preparation program leader, can you tell us about the programming that you've led at Southern to create strong relationships with East Baton Rouge Parish and other districts in the metro area and across the state? What are some of the successes that you've had with those programs, and what are some of the challenges that you face?
Okay, here at Southern University, we currently have several standing MOUs with several parishes in the state of Louisiana, and also outside of the state of Louisiana. We have partnerships and MOUs with East Baton Rouge Parish, West Baton Rouge Parish, Baker, a host of charter school organizations, LAE, NEA, APEL. We just signed an MOU with the Outlook University Independent School District in Michigan. And our goal is to immerse ourselves in all these partnerships and organizations, and also have them create collaborative programs within within the School of Education. So how we recruit through those programs is we have one program we have is called the Grow Your Own, where we go into a rural area, into their high schools, and we recruit students who don't want to leave the area where they grew up, but also want to teach. So we recruit them to come to Southern University, we train them, get them certified, and then we send them back home so that they can teach in their school district where they grew up from. We also partner with SHIO for the last 5 years, where we participated in the Project Pipeline Repair Program, where we went in and recruited African-American males, because we do know that it's a shortage of African-American males in the school system. And we recruited African-American males in grades 10th and 11th, and we groomed them to become educators and to major in education. So we did things like they spent a 1-week summer program on our campus. They earned 9 credits throughout the school year. They had mentors who are Southern University employees, male mentors to help them navigate through the Southern University system. And our goal is, once they graduate high school, that because they've already earned some education course credit, that they come to Southern University and either major or minor in education. We've also paired with Baker School System, where we are part of their Educators Rising program, and we're immersing ourselves into their middle schools to kind of recruit students beginning in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, grooming them through high school, and then in hopes of having them come to Southern University to major in education. And even not just Southern University, we're just trying to get them acclimated with how the system works with education. So in hopes that they will major or minor in education. We also have partnerships with our school district where we are able to immerse ourselves in the classrooms with our students. We do professional development at the school sites, and also they come and do some professional development with our faculty to make sure that we are still abreast of what goes on in the classroom in K-12 day-to-day, because we are outside of the classroom. We also do things like we pair with iCare, where our students go into the school system and do anti-bully expos throughout the year at local elementary schools throughout East Baton Rouge Parish. We've been successful with many of our programs that we've initiated through these partnerships. Some challenges that we are having is that we know there's equity issues within our middle and high schools here in Louisiana. We do know that we have some systemic barriers that block African Americans and other people of color of pursuing degrees in education and getting certified in education. We know praxis is a huge barrier for our students, and making a 22 on the ACT so they don't have to take praxis 1 is a huge barrier for our students because of these issues. So we've put some initiatives in place to kind of curb that and give our students resources so they are successful when they're taking these praxis exams. We just received $500,000 from our Title III grant on campus to redo and update our praxis lab. So now we have a fully functional online and face-to-face praxis lab that has a test bank of potential praxis questions to help students study and ready themselves for those exams. We also have a peer-to-peer study program where students who pass certain parts of praxis exams, we pay them to tutor other students to pass those parts of praxis exams. One issue that we know with our students is because they're taking these tests over and over again, finances is an issue. So we are able to offer the students a job as a tutor, so in the hopes that they will use those monies to pay for other praxis exams. With this new computer lab, we also have a workshop lab that we've built, and we have content specialists in our department and in the content areas on campus, such as biology, physics, mathematics, and they're able to come into this space and hold workshops throughout the semester to help students earn content, gather some more content to pass these praxis exams, and also learn some more testing skills to pass these praxis exams. So those are the things that we're doing here at the university to help our students pass praxis so that we can get more students of color into the classrooms.
Thanks so much, Tanya. And really nice to hear about Educators Rising again, as you mentioned with what Kim highlighted. So it's a great program. Renee, next question for you. We know that Xavier has been intentional in creating partnerships with other teacher preparation programs and with New Orleans schools to put more teachers of color into classrooms. Can you tell us about some of the programming that has been successful in recruiting and preparing teachers of color at the local level? And then also talk to us about what's gone well and what additional support might help, particularly from the state.
Okay. All right. Yes. At Xavier, we have partnered with some of the teacher prep programs that are in New Orleans, specifically those teacher prep programs that pretty much cater to the charter school girls, such as TNTP, Teach for America, Relay, and we also partnered with New Schools for New Orleans and Loyola University. We felt that a partnership, a collaboration, so I'm actually collaborating with my competitors, and we felt that this would be a way of giving students more choice and be more attractive to come to New Orleans, because we do have a teacher shortage there, as we do throughout the state. So with our partnership with NSNO, New Schools for New Orleans, They were able to hire a young man, Kasim Davis, who's a brother, a young black man, who was in charge of recruitment. And that was an excellent strategy because Kasim and his staff were able to cast a very wide net, uh, go to places where there are a lot of black males or black folks to recruit to this program. Now, the program itself is very, very unique. And I'm going to get back to the recruitment part in a minute. And I think I need to give you the context of the program itself. So with these partnerships, we were able to get a grant from the US DOE. And our part of the grant, we developed a teacher residency program. And our teacher residency program is modeled after the medical residency program. So our students are required to be in a residency in a classroom full time. This could be a barrier for a lot of folks because that means they can't work. So one of the strategies that we use to help them not worry about work is that money. So money is a great incentive. And so we were able to pay our students a $25,000 living stipend, as well as a $10,000 allowance for tuition. We also helped them with praxis exams, and we also helped them with any other kind of financial barrier that would keep them from being successful in the classroom. Now, all of these incentives were offered up front during recruitment. So Kasim and his staff were able to say to a potential applicant, if you join this program, you don't have to worry about finances because this is available to you. So in this particular recruitment piece, and in casting this very wide net, as well as being intentional where he goes, we were able to garner over 700 applications for our program. But we don't have that kind of capacity, not yet anyway. But out of that, over those 700 applications, we were only able to recruit 10 black males. And even though that made up 14% of our class, it's still not a very large number. Our greatest number came from black women. We were able to recruit 61% black women. So that means in New Orleans, we were able to provide 75% of our students of color to the New Orleans public schools. Our second strategy with the recruitment piece was that Kasim, as well as my staff, the staff of the Norman C. Francis Teacher Residency Program, Kenya Campbell, Tanya Baker, and Daphne Barnes, were available for any questions. They were accessible for any questions because since we were casting such a wide net, we were getting people from outside of Louisiana. They had a lot of questions, particularly when the pandemic hit, what was happening with the schools, et cetera. And so we found that having that kind of connection was very, very important so that people can get their questions answered. The third thing that we were able to do was to, once we decided on an applicant, that applicant received a telephone interview, and then they also received a face-to-face interview, and then they had to do a lesson. Now, for people who have never taught, we were not expecting them to have a perfect lesson. We just wanted them to teach, because really the idea behind this activity was feedback. We wanted to see if people could take feedback, because the feedback is very important to the development of a teacher. And so once all of those things were done, we then partnered with schools. We have about 20 to 25 partnerships in the New Orleans area. And these schools looked at our applicants. They ranked them as according to how they may fit in their schools. The applicants looked at the schools and looked to see whether or not they match their particular value system. And we actually did a match. We have this algorithm that we use to match schools with our applicants. And that has worked very well because everyone had a choice. People were able to pick the school that they would like to be at, and the schools were able to pick the person that they would like to be. The fourth thing that we did, and we had to make this very clear with our schools, is that we are partners with our schools. So if you have any issues, anything that comes up with any of our residents, please call us. We'll come and we'll talk to you and we'll sit down and have a conversation, so you're not left as a principal or a superintendent trying to figure these things out by yourself. We will actually come and be a partner with you. Now, one of the things that we have run into as challenges, and we've asked our Black males in particular, and looking at the data, what were some of the barriers to keep folks from coming to the program, and particularly our young Black males? And of course, praxis, you've heard that already. I think everyone in here has had some kind of praxis boot camp, some kind of praxis help. We've tried everything, as well as Southern, and Suno, who is here in New Orleans, actually has a praxis weekend thing that students can go to. So all of us are trying to do something to help our students get through praxis. Personally, we think at Xavier that it's the trauma from K-12 testing that we're trying to help our students through, because they know the content. We feel they know the content. It's just getting over that trauma of testing. We also found with them that the other tests, like our admission test, the Miller's Analogy test, or the GRE, that could be something that could be in the way as well. Some of our students, unfortunately, when you do that background check, they may have had a little something happen in their juvenile life, and that might keep them from coming into the teaching arena, unfortunately. And then a lot of our young men don't have any experience working with kids per se. So we, in our work, we found that we had a nice group of folks that can actually go into the schools and become residents. But we also found a good sized number of our young Black men who could have benefited from a program that we would call, what we're calling a pre-residency program, like giving them some experience working with kids, working in schools, understanding the culture of the school, so that they can be successful once they come into a residency program and then become a teacher of record. So these things have worked for us. We found them to be very successful. In talking to our students, we have identified some of the barriers and what we can do about those barriers. And a program like this is a little expensive. So we're always looking for money, if that's what the state would like to help us with. And we would like for this program to keep going, because we're finding that this program is very successful. You can look at our performance profile and see how well we scored, because our students are not just getting what we're telling them in the classroom, but they're also experiencing the theory that they're learning in the classroom, well, at Xavier, in the classroom. And having that kind of partnership with our schools and being able to have that kind of communication has been very, very helpful and has made our program very successful. We could not have done it without the schools, school leaders, the residents, and of course the staff at NSNO and Norma C. Francis Teacher Resident Program.
Thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate your insight on that, and particularly the kind of the point about collaborating with competitors. It's a community effort. It takes everybody involved to really address this. So thanks for sharing. And my last question, Cito, question to you. Tanya and Renee talked about teacher preparation programs teacher prep from talk about this issue from a teacher prep program perspective. Can you talk to us about diversification of teacher workforce from the perspective of a district? What has been encouraging about these partnerships, about creating a pipeline of educators in East Baton Rouge Parish? And what can you say to others who are looking to build these partnerships from a district perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the first thing is the beautiful thing about here in East Baton Rouge is we have Southern University in our backyard. And so we can go right to our backyard and recruit and also start partnering with them around a lot of things, which we already do, which are super grateful to them for that. And so, but things like I think the praxis is a big issue. So trying to create programs to start helping their teachers to support their students to start that process early as possible, even from the freshman year, I would say. And once you can identify, hey, this child wants to do, I mean, right now, even here in our district, we have a lot of kids that go to Southern University. So if we see that they are having an interest from their senior year going into their freshman year, just start preparing them right there for that in that pipeline. So you kind of have your grow your own model. The other push is trying to use, right now we get a lot of care dollars, even using dollars where you can kind of pay for their scholarship to see if they go through that pipeline. You can start paying for them to remove financial barriers. Finance is a barrier for many students, and so how do you do that? Also thinking about the internship model. I think it's important that I think it's a very effective model where I know when I became a teacher, I went to Vanderbilt. They had an internship model, and you could be there for a whole year. And as you learn there, you also get your first year of teaching, part of that process. And so you can start doing things like that. The other part is recruitment. I mean, I always think about my own experience. I've been, in our HR department, we've been talking about how does recruitment look like. You find pretty early that you can find a lot of female candidates, but male candidates are not always as encouraged. So how do you create some opportunities for them to want to pick teaching as a profession and going through that? So trying to do those components of recruitment. And the last thing I think that is really important is just creating different type of support networks with your partners throughout the matriculation of students. I think I heard, different strategies. I think I've heard from what Renee said, and Tanya talked about the programs that they had. And I just think that those are kind of the big areas. We need here in East Baton Rouge, I think we're pretty fortunate because of the partnerships that we've cultivated. But in other school districts I've worked in, not everyone has a Southern University or those contexts with them, so they have to go out to other parts of the country to start trying to connect with other partners and also collaborate across partnerships. I think sometimes people stay within their own silos around doing some of this work, and there's just I tell folks there's just not enough candidates. So how do you collaborate together around that? And I think those are the biggest thing. And I know from the LEA standpoint, in the seat that I sit, is also trying to work with legislators around, how do we remove the barrier of the praxis? I think because that's a huge problem for getting diverse students from diverse backgrounds into our school system.
Thanks so much, Sito. And we are almost 1 minute from time. So I guess any open for the group, any last minute thoughts on advice for our participants that are thinking about doing this work? Any last words of advice that our panelists would offer in work to diversify teacher pipelines?
I guess my word of advice would be to collaborate with your competitors. I mean, collaboration for us has really worked great. We're getting ready to enter into another collaboration. The HBCUs in the state of Louisiana are collaborating to actually do a Grow Your Own program, as Kimberly has described earlier. So we're going to recruit from the high schools, and the high school students will have choice as to which HBCU they would like to attend once they are finished with their high school and who they would like to go to become a teacher. So collaborate.
Thanks so much, Renee. And I think we're at time. So Eric, is that right? Thanks again to the panelists. I really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.